Hello? Can anybody hear me?
Douglas, we can't
Yeah.
hear you. We can't hear you. Please start it.
Okay, right, sorry. Okay,
Okay.
good morning, everybody, and welcome to this presentation on ISO 9001 or AS9100, and we're going to talk about internal auditor training as well. So the topics for today we've just covered. I'm Douglas Bull. As you probably know, CFE Cert is an independent auditing company and academy for this kind of training, and they hold UCAS and IAS accreditation. CFE Cert operate in many different environments or countries and offer a wide range of services, including gap analysis training. Audit and certification. These services cover various areas, including information security, business continuity, IT service management, quality management, GDPR, and personal data management systems. During this presentation, I will pause at the end of each section just for a couple of seconds. If there are any questions, please ask the questions. If not, put them in the sidebar and we'll catch them afterwards. Okay, so the three topics we're going to talk about this morning. I'm going to give you a background of my experience in the aerospace industry and with working with AS9100. We'll then talk about organizations that have an ISO 9001 approval and want to move to an AS9100 approval. And then we'll talk about a 2-day internal auditor training course. Okay, so my work experience, I'm a time-served engineer, but that was a long time ago. I spent 36 years with BAE Systems. I started as a fitter on the Tornado program, and then I went into inspection where I worked on flat and formed parts, heat treatment, chemical etching, carbon fiber composites on the A320 program. I then moved into commercial and did some estimating for the Hawk Red Arrows. I moved into QA internal auditing around 92 or 93, and that's where I've more or less spent the rest of my career with BAE Systems. I started as a QA internal auditor on the days when we used to go out with a book of questions. And some of the questions weren't really that relevant. So we, as auditors, we didn't have to think about the questions. They were already there, ready to ask. At that time, BAE Systems decided that they wanted a third-party accreditation for ISO 9001. And what we did was we had LRQA and BSI on site, and we decided we could work easier with LRQA. Once LRQA was selected, they came and did our audits. I was generally on each visit an escort in one of the areas. With working with LRQA, we managed to take advantage of all of their training courses, their lead assessor courses, their QMS courses. So a lot of our auditors went on to do the lead assessor course with LRQA. I was then seconded onto the Eurofighter Typhoon team, and that was for handover of aircraft, what we call the cased white aircraft. They were the twin-seat aircraft. They operated from Wharton because RAF Coningsby wasn't ready to accept the aircraft. Once that secondment came to an end, I moved into the flight development team as the quality engineer. And the flight development team, we had 5 aircraft that we were developing and growing the mission capability of them. So at any one time, we'd have 2 flying and 3 were in layups being upgraded. From there, I moved into Typhoon as the Integrated Logistics Services QA Manager. My primary responsibility there was the ground support equipment for Typhoons, the training devices at Coningsby, the mission systems, which we stood up. And then the company said, "You've done such a good job of that. Why don't you go and do it in Saudi Arabia?" So we did the same thing in Saudi Arabia at the Taif Air Base. Once I'd finished all that, I came back into BAE and I worked as the Hawk in-service QA manager. And this was the point where I started to get into the AS9100. Partway through that job, the company had to move from Rev B to Rev C, and it was only the Hawk engineering team that were going to be AS9100 approved. We managed to get that approval. We learned a lot on that journey. And subsequent to that, the part of the business where I worked, what was called Defence Information Training Systems, decided that they would go for ISO AS9100 at Rev C, and we got the business through that. We unfortunately had 5 minor non-conformances from 40 odd days of auditing. And I got the option to leave BAE Systems on an early retirement package, which I took advantage of. I did my aerospace auditor transition training course and passed that. And then I worked for LRQA and AFNOR for about 8-9 years. Again, most of that was on aerospace work, but I did do some ISO work. Okay, right. Do you need AS9100? Okay, so two questions to ask yourself. Do you have a contractual requirement to be certified to AS9100? If you are supplying to the aerospace industry, most of them now want AS9100 certification for all of their suppliers. The second reason you might choose to do it is a strategic decision. Okay, so if the answer to the first question is no, then stick with ISO 9001. It's perfectly adequate if you don't have to do the AS stuff. If it is a strategic decision, you need to think about the following. Given the aerospace requirement to conduct first article inspection or first article verification when a product changes process, location, or supplier, it is a risky and costly business to change to a new supplier. From the aerospace side of it, from the primes, there has to be a very, very good reason to change a supplier. It's a very costly business and it does have certain risks. So if you are going to go for AS9100, there's a few things you need to understand. AS9100 is a hard standard to achieve and maintain. The standard is black and white. There is no assessor judgment. All non-conformities have to be closed before certification can be recommended. Your assessment man days will increase. AS assessments also cost more per man day, and this is due in part to the AS auditor training and competencies. So all of the auditors that are working on aerospace work have to have a minimum of 6 years experience in the aerospace and defence industry. They have to have completed and passed the aerospace auditor transition training course. And every 12 months, they have to reapply or resubmit for refresher training. And every 3 years, they have to submit a complete history of what they've done to maintain their competencies. The idea of this is that all of your AS assessors should have the same understanding of the standard and apply it accordingly in organizations. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. Okay, so I'm just going to spend a little bit of time on who's responsible for this aerospace standard. Down the left-hand side, you don't need to worry too much about that. That's the Civil Aviation Organization, and they're made up of countries, and they provide regulations around air traffic control and things like that. So we don't need to worry too much about them. The right-hand side is where the International Aerospace Quality Group, the IAQG, they're made up of customers like the UK MOD, the US DOD, and other countries, and also industry. The primes like BAE Systems, Airbus, Rolls-Royce, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and they give us these three standards. So the first standard is AS9100, Quality Management System Requirements for Aviation, Space and Defence Organisations. You would go for this standard if you are delivering any products or service or designing anything. The second standard they've given us is 9110, and that is purely for maintenance organisations. And then the third one is 9120, and that's the requirement for stockists and distributors. Okay. Are there any questions on that so far? Okay, I'll carry on. So what we've said so far is that we've got AS9100. Now, AS9100, the basic base of that is ISO 9001 2015. You have to be able to satisfy ISO 9001 2015 before you can move to the aerospace standard. And the aerospace standard has a number of additional requirements. And these are specific to the types of products and services that the aerospace industry offers. So you have to be cognizant of critical items, those items that would have a detrimental effect on the ability to carry out the mission. You need to understand how to measure and key characteristics of products. The other thing we've got is on-time delivery performance. The aerospace industry is very keen on making sure that they get things on time. It's very costly if things don't come on time. We have debates with our clients about on-time delivery. We're trying to get the on-time delivery in full, because we have suppliers, clients that say, I'm 100% on my on-time delivery. But that's not strictly true, because they've had an order for 10, they've delivered 2 on the day it was due, and the other 8 followed on. So we're saying that's not on 100% performance. The other area is configuration management. Counterfeit parts is a big problem in the industry. So we spend time looking at how counterfeit parts prevention is managed within the business. We also have this thing called obsolescence, and obsolescence is where products or parts are going out of service. They're no longer being made, but they are being replaced. And again, if we look back to we're changing something, an assessment has to be done whether that new product meets all the requirements. And then we've got ethical behavior. So I'm going to talk now about the certification cycle. So if you haven't got AS9100 and you want AS9100, you will have selected a certification body. You will have had plenty of time talking to them to get a contract. The first interaction you will have with an aerospace auditor is the stage 1 assessment. The stage 1 assessment is usually conducted at the headquarters site. And the stage 1 assessment is very much a tick list exercise. It doesn't challenge anything at that point. It goes through asking questions like, do you have a management system? Yes, tick the box. Does that management system define the sequence and interaction of processes? Yes, tick the box. And it goes all through the standard like that. It doesn't test anything. And the outcome from that visit is a gap analysis. It will indicate where more work is needed. The rules around the stage 1 and the stage 2, which I'll come on to in a minute, is you can't do the stage 1 and the stage 2 on the same day. There has to be at least a 1-day gap. That has never, ever been my experience. We've always done the stage 1, left organizations with things to fix, and then we've come back to the stage 2. The stage 2 has to be done within 6 months of the stage 1, otherwise we repeat the stage 1. The stage 2 is a very comprehensive audit. It looks at all of your processes that are applicable to the standard, and it looks at all of the locations where you are carrying out that work, even if some of that work is done on customer sites or whatever. So the outcome from that is, if you've got no non-conformances, certification can be recommended. Generally, non-conformances are raised and the certification cannot be recommended. You then have 90 days to close the non-conformance. Now, this 90 days is 90 days from the closing meeting. That's when the 90 days starts. It's not actually 90 days for you as a business. It's probably more like 60 to 65, because we have to come back on site, we have to review the non-conformances, we have to close them, and then they go back into a technical review. So we need some time at the back office to verify that those non-conformances have been closed effectively, and then you will get a certificate recommended. Okay. Within 12 months, you will do surveillance visit 1, and within 12 months of that, you'll do surveillance visit 2. Now, these 2 visits are sampling exercises, so they're not going to look at all of your management system and all of your processes. Between the 2 visits, we'd hope to cover all of the processes that you've got and all of the sites. The visit outcomes from that, if we raise non-conformities, you've got the follow-up again within 90 days, and generally the certification is not impacted. About 4 to 5 months prior to certificate expiry, you will have to do a recertification visit. The recertification visit is exactly the same as the stage 2. It's looking at all of your processes, all of your locations. The outcomes from that, if there's no non-conformities raised, continued certification is recommended. If we raise non-conformities, you're back into the 90 days. We do a follow-up on site, we close the non-conformities, and certification is then recommended. And that is a 3-year cycle from SV1 to the research, and that happens every 3 years. It follows that process. Any questions on that? Okay, I'm going to talk about scopes now and why scopes are important. So every aerospace and defence organisation has a scope of approval. The purpose of the scope is to define and effectively communicate the services, activities, products, and or processes of the organisation. The scope, I look at the scope as an organisation shop window. It's displaying what you can do. The scope of the AS certificate, it may be different from the services and everything else that you offer. The scope for the aerospace sector is kind of a box. If you think about it as a box in which the things that you do for your approval, your accreditation, that's what's managed. You can exclude certain paragraphs. The most common one is design, 8.3. If you don't do any design work, if you are purely doing work for an organization, working to their specifications, their drawings, you do not have to have design control. You can legitimately exclude design from your scope of approval. One thing that you can't do is exclude any part of your process that are used to deliver the services or products. Okay. So we've talked about the audit process in a little bit, and I'm going to talk now about non-conformances and non-conformance grading. Okay. We have two gradings of non-conformances, majors and minors. What's the difference? A major is defined as a complete breakdown of the management system. It can relate to the product, the service, the processes, and the QMS. There are 4 ways in which an assessor can raise a major non-conformance. If we find several instances of a similar issue across the organisation, we won't raise a number of minors. We'll roll that up into a major as a systematic failure of the business. It's also a complete failure to comply with the requirement of the standard, i.e. there's no evidence of management review. If we have a deviation that, in the view of the assessor, can affect product safety, we have a 7-day containment action. And that is 7 days from the end of the audit, unless it's really significant and we raise it during the audit, which we don't generally do. We tend to leave it to the closing meeting, but we do signpost every day where we think the non-conformances are, to give you a chance to have a look at them and see if the auditor got it wrong or whether you agree with the gradings. The 4th way is our special offer. So if on SV1 we found issues with calibration, we came back to do SV2, we've closed the non-conformance, but we've only kind of had 60 days or whatever of evidence that you've done the fix. At the 2nd visit, we will look more closely at that. And if we find that there are still issues with calibration, we have to raise a non-conformance for the calibration issue. And then we have to raise, in accordance with the requirements of the scheme, a 2nd major non-conformance against 10.2.2 of the standard for ineffective root cause corrective action. It's very hard, it's very frustrating, but that's the rules of the scheme. And a minor non-conformance is a single instance of not achieving a requirement of the standard or the organisation's own process requirement that does not affect product or service conformity. So an example of that is perhaps your audit programme slipping. So you've done 30% of your audits, we're just a couple behind, we might just give you a minor non-conformance for that. I've also looked into, and I haven't talked about, what is OASIS. So OASIS is the online supplier information system. It is where all of the information for the AS sector is stored. It's used to record all of the audit reports. So all the audit reports are now done online and stored in OASIS. All the non-conformances are raised online in OASIS. So that's from the auditor's perspective. From the customer's perspective, it holds all of the information from all of your audits and your non-conformances. It also gives you a list of all the certification bodies. it gives you a list of all the approved suppliers, and it also gives you a list of all of the authorized auditors that are on the system. The issue we've got with Oasis is you can give access to the people that you want as a business, but the primes in the setup, like Rolls-Royce, Lockheed Martin, they can view the whole of the database. So we have to be careful sometimes what we put in there. So some of the common findings then that we've come across, and I pulled the report from Oasis just before I left. Section 4 is the management system elements, and what we tend to find there most commonly is that the KPIs, the key performance indicators that you have to have, are not maintained, or there's no evidence of action. So when a target hasn't been achieved for a particular month, what we're looking for is a rationale or an explanation for that. And we accept that we have blips from one month to the next, but providing we can see that it is a blip and it's been looked at and you've decided to take no further action, we're comfortable with it. Where we are not so comfortable is where we don't see any actions for a trend of declining performance, or where we see actions that are not addressing they're not improving the performance. So that is where we would raise the non-conformances. The other one is the scope of the management system is not current. A number of organizations do some changes, they introduce stuff, but they don't tell the certification body. The first time we find it is when we're actually doing the audit, and you get the non-conformance for that. Section 5 is the leadership section. Now, this was introduced in ISO 9001 2015, and before that, we used to do audits, and we used to have an opening meeting, and we used to have all of the senior management there and everybody that was involved. And at the end of that opening meeting, the senior management would say, right, thank you, Dougie, we'll see you at the closing meeting. I'll leave you with the quality manager. Not anymore. We have to have an interview with senior management. And going back to what I was saying about reporting on Oasis, from LRQA's perspective, we put some stuff on Oasis, nothing that gives away the strategic intent of the business or any of its secrets. We put some more detail into the LRQA report, which resides with LRQA and the client. Nobody else sees that. Section 6 is the planning section. It's a fairly short section, but it's very important because it talks about risk and opportunity and planning of change. And what we find here is that organizations aren't recording risk, they're not tracking risk, they're not reviewing the risks. And the other side to that is the opportunities. From my book, every risk presents an opportunity, and we want to see that those opportunities, the standard requires that those opportunities are managed as well. Section 7 is term support, and there's a lot in Section 7 because it talks about calibration, training records, document and data control. What we tend to find here in the operational areas especially is daily maintenance and startup checks are not completed. Calibration equipment is used past the calibration date. So we're not saying that the item is out of calibration. It is being used past the calibration due date. Operations. This is what I call the doing section. This is the big part of the standard. This covers everything from contract review right through to product delivery and control of non-conforming product. And what we tend to find here is out of sequence workings not been authorized, and amendments to job cards and specs not authorized, operations not completed before the next operation starts. This is a bit more from the organizations that are still very much paper-based where their route card is signed or stamped by the operator and then moves on to the next section with the job. Electronically controlled inspection stages don't seem to have the same problems because the system will not let you book onto the job until the last operation's been completed. Operations, incorrect spec, revisions, or not working to the spec requirements. So there's a deviation from the times and the temperatures that are laid out in the specification. Life items out of date, lack of product protection, and the risk of foreign object debris. In terms of Section 9, measurement and analysis, internal audits not conducted to plan, audit findings not actioned without undue delay, management reviews not conducted or incomplete. And then in Section 10, mostly what we're finding there is the lack of management of corrective actions. So corrective actions are overdue. Any questions? Okay then. So if you decide that you want to take this any further, we will do some things to help you. First of all, I'm not a salesman. That's the office's job. I'm here to help. I'll walk the journey with you. What we will provide is an initial assessment of your management system, and we'll probably do this as a hybrid, Teams online and on site. We'll help plug the gaps in the management system. And I want to stress here that it is your management system, and I'm not going to write it. I've had too many instances where other agencies have written a management system, left it with the business don't fully understand it, and they don't really own it. What we'll also do is we'll do briefings to the senior management team, the quality teams and the operations teams. There is another presentation that I have which is purely around AS9100, and it covers some of the topics that we've talked about in here, but it's a 45-minute explanation as to what it is. We'll conduct a gap analysis, and this gap analysis won't be a tick list. It will actually be testing the effectiveness of the requirement. So we'll be doing an audit. We can also offer auditor training against the AS9100 or against ISO 9001. If we do the auditor training, it would be useful to take those auditors and help develop them further by doing an AS9100 readiness review prior to your formal stage 1. And we'll do ongoing support and help to close and review corrective actions prior to the formal follow-up with the organizer, with the certification body. And this is my get out of jail free card. There are no guarantees of success at the audit. The audit's based on sampling. It's what we find at the time. Internal auditor training. Right. This is a training package that I've put together from my experience of auditing, from a number of audit training courses that I've been on, and a number of training courses that I've delivered from other agencies. Most of it was developed at BAE Systems, where we did virtually the same course, 2 days in-house. So this auditor training package has been developed to be delivered in-house. That's the important thing. It's not in a hotel, it's not in a conference room, it's in your business, it's in your premises. The difference with this audit, with this training, is that the delegates will on day 2 use the learning from day 1 to conduct a live audit in the business, in one of the business areas. They will hold the opening meeting, they'll conduct the audit, they'll report the audit, raising any corrective actions, and then present their findings in an audit report to the business at the closing meeting. The objectives of this training course are to provide delegates with the knowledge to facilitate the development of skills and competencies to conduct internal quality audits. The course will cover the following topics, and it's very much topping and tailing here. If you don't want to do AS9100, we can focus just on ISO 9001. The actual auditing process between AS9100 and ISO 9001 won't be fundamentally different. The topics will be different, but not the actual way that we approach the audit. We'll talk about the audit end-to-end process. We'll talk about auditor responsibilities, auditing skills and techniques, and then they will go out and conduct an internal quality audit in a fairly safe environment. So this is roughly what the timetable looks like for the 2 days. Every course starts with a pre-course questionnaire. It's a true or false statement on the standard, whether it's ISO 9001 or AS9100. The delegates will get a questionnaire. They have to go through it and determine whether the statement is true or false, and they then have to justify that by reading through the standard and saying, I think that's false because of whatever they think. That will then lead us into our first syndicate exercise, which will put the teams together. Between them, they will come up with a consensus, and they will then feed that back. We'll then talk about the advantages and disadvantages of audit. We'll have a brief overview of the audit process, from sort of getting audits onto the audit program to closing down the non-conformances. We'll do the whole cycle of the audit. We'll talk about audit scopes, objectives, and opening meetings. We'll talk about the way that people should approach an audit. It's something that LRQA drilled into us, the six-stage approach. And then we're going to spend the rest of the afternoon talking about how to conduct the audit. We'll look at some corrective actions. We have some examples of good and bad corrective actions. The syndicate exercise has to determine which of those would be presented to senior management, or what's wrong with them if they weren't. From then on, the delegates are planning for their audit on day 2. They have to develop the scope, they have to come up with the objectives, they have to develop the opening meeting and an aid memoir or checklist. It's up to them. Day 2 starts with a recap quiz. We'll then talk about auditor skills and behaviours. And then around 10 o'clock, 10:15, depending on what your break times are, the first team will go out and conduct the audit, and they will do the opening meeting. They'll be observed for the opening meeting, questioning techniques, their skills and behaviours. It's generally me that is observing what they're doing, and when they've run out of questions, because very few of them manage to get the whole hour's allocated time, we have a hot debrief with the auditee, get their perspective of it, and then I'll give them my perspective. And we'll just do that with 2 or 3 teams, however many teams are there. It ideally works better with 3 in the team, so we'd ideally want 3, 6, or 9 people on the course, 12 at a push. Once they've done their auditing, they'll come back, they'll do the report any strengths, any weaknesses, they'll raise the non-conformities, and hopefully the non-conformities will actually go into your non-conformance corrective action system, and they should be addressed. And it seems really hard when they've done all the work that you don't actually resolve the non-conformance. We'll hold the closing meetings, and then we'll do a review, make sure everybody's achieved their objectives, and that will be the end of day 2. Right. Any questions? Not seeing anything. Right, I shall move on. Okay, so thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation, this webinar, and hopefully you can enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much now. Bye.